All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight, Intro to FASD. My name is Jessica Ferguson, and I'll be your host for this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we, the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation, are a provincial entity. We acknowledge that we carry out our work on traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which these nations first signed with the British Crown in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey titles and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We, the staff and members of the board, pay respect to the elders past and present and descendants of this land. We honor the knowledge keepers and seek their guidance as we strive to develop closer relationships with the Indigenous people in New Brunswick. As an organization focused on vulnerable children in the care system, we express these words with both humility and hope. So tonight, our goal is to have a new level of understanding of FASD in New Brunswick. I'm very excited to have Tanya Walsh here with us to help us understand this topic a little more. But before we dive into our discussion, I'm going to take a moment to remind everyone about our network and our upcoming programming. We are very excited to share our upcoming permanency conference on November 15th and 16th. We're thrilled to have Joanne Lemire and Megan McLeod present on Saturday and a day of workshops with various topics pertaining to caregivers of children from the care system. It's going to be a great weekend, and all information can be found on our website at www.nbadoption.ca. So a couple of housekeeping items. To get the most of our presentation, we encourage everyone to switch to speaker view so you can focus on the presenter. We love engagement here, so please do use the chat feature throughout the presentation to ask your questions or state your comments. And you can find the chat and the speaker view by pushing those three little dots on the bottom of your screen. And feel free to use the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen as well. If you're following along live on our Facebook group, go ahead and ask your questions there as well. At the end of the presentation, we'll be turning off the live video for our Q&A. If you're joining us live, please do register for future webinars if you'd like to take part in the Q&A session. At the end of the webinar, when you close your browser, there'll be a brief poll that comes up, and we greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to answer the 5 questions. That your feedback is invaluable to supporting our ongoing work. Okay, now to turn it over to Tanya.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I love being able to spend time with fellow parents, and especially in the adoption world, as that is near and dear to my heart. I do work as a regional coordinator, educational coordinator with the NB Center of Excellence. But above that and beyond that, I am a mom of an amazing, snappy, redheaded little 16-year-old, soon to be 16-year-old, and he was adopted from birth. How I like to kind of run these sessions is it's an open door policy with me. So feel free to, like Jessica had mentioned in the chats, ask the questions, the comments, anything like that going along. You're not going to throw me off. We have like just a little PowerPoint that I'm going to share. And I'm open to everything with the adoption, with FASD, with just general. So without further ado, hang on, there we go. So for our learning objectives for this evening is that I hope that you'll be able to leave this evening with a better understanding of FASD and the effects of alcohol consumption during pregnancy, to hopefully identify some primary characteristics and secondary outcomes, which are now called adverse outcomes associated with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I hope that you'll be able to gain a greater understanding of the reasons why a woman may drink alcohol during her pregnancy, and if we could just reimagine our expectations and possibilities for individuals with FASD. So before we get into the nit and grit of what FASD is, my journey, what is just to give a little snapshot of that, is that my late husband and I adopted my son from birth, and that was after many years of in vitros and trying to conceive. and he had four diagnoses before his FASD diagnosis, which he received at the age of 6. We're going to learn a little bit tonight about brain domains. We're going to learn about primary characteristics, and we're also going to learn that many of our individuals do have overlapping disabilities. And for my son, for instance, he had his first diagnosis was failure to thrive in the NICU. Then he was 2 or 3 months old and was diagnosed with acid reflux disease, and then ADHD and autism. And I can't remember for the life of me which came first, but that was around the age 3 and 4 year olds. And then by 6, he was diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And it has been a journey since. And I'm very public about our journey. I'm open about our journey. So there's no questions that are off limits. So feel free to do so. And FASD is a very complex disability. It has a lot of things that are attached to it, like stigma and things like that. And one of the personal things that I try to do is to stomp out that stigma, to talk about it openly. And so FASD is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It's a diagnostic term, and it's used to describe the impacts on the brain and body of individuals prenatally exposed to alcohol. Just gonna fix my screen a little bit there. FASD is a lifelong disability. Individuals living with FASD will experience some degrees of challenges in their daily living and need support with their motor skills, physical health, learning, memory and attention, communication, emotional regulation, their social skills to reach their full potential. But each individual living with FASD is unique and has areas of both strengths and challenges. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight on some strengths and some challenges, but we're going to end and really tone in on their strengths. The important thing with FASD is that it is a full body disorder. We will talk a lot about tonight with the brain, and it's a brain-based disability, but we know that it is a full body disability. With Miles Hemlerick and the Changemakers, the Lay of the Land survey that was done in 2020, this is some of the things that they researched that their adults that they found that their adults had. So eczema, for instance, is 2.7 times higher, asthma 4.7 times higher, ear infections 146 times higher. So it's very typical in our world. You know, if we have a child who's running along and they're playing, let's say in the schoolyard, and they may tend to get out of breath quicker than the average person, than the average child their age. Or if they're complaining that their bones hurt, we're very quick as adults to be, oh, you're 10, you're 12, you're not, you're fine, you're not, your bones aren't hurting, talk to me when you're 50, those sort of things. But in actual fact, that their bones could be hurting, that it is a full body disorder. And that's usually one of the things that are overlooked. The prevalence of FASD in Canada is a very conservative amount, is 4% of Canadian population. That's on the low end of it. We suspect it's much higher than that, but conservatively, it's 4%, which means over 1.6 million individuals in Canada are living with FASD. In New Brunswick alone, pre-COVID, we would estimate that over 250 babies could be born with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder each year in our small province, which would mean more than 34,000 could be affected. If you're raising a child with intellectual disabilities or FASD, then I don't have to tell you the economic impact and cost for our families and our individuals, because you would know that firsthand. And per year in Canada, it's $9.7 billion. And that is what's costing parents, caregivers, families, also the individual with FASD, our healthcare system, educational system, justice system. And if you're living this life, then I don't have to tell you about the economic cost of it. Alcohol consumption and unplanned pregnancies, 45.5% of our Canadian adults reported consuming alcohol in the last 7 days. 10 to 15% of our pregnancies in Canada are alcohol exposed, and 60% of our pregnancies are unplanned. So if we think back, if you have biological children and you think back to, when you were pregnant, you wouldn't even have known you were pregnant maybe till like 10 or 12 weeks along, right? And many of our pregnancies are not planned. Um, and that is what causes the rate of alarming for us. How are we doing, Jessica? Is there any questions? I'm going to just take a break here and
Oh, there is a question.
oh,
Is there a difference in which stage a woman drinks in her pregnancy?
nope. So damage can be done at any point in pregnancy, and the it, what we're going to learn, I'll answer that as we go along a little bit better, but the damage can be done at any point during pregnancy. And the research is still being done on consumption, like how much alcohol, kind of alcohol. Again, I think that question will be answered in the slides ahead. And there we go. So some reasons why a woman may drink during pregnancy is that they're unaware that they're pregnant, unaware of the extent of damage that alcohol can cause to the developing fetus, underestimate the harm of alcohol consumption. It can cause and women who drink during pregnancy and their children appear healthy. Women may use alcohol to cope with difficult life situations such as violence and depression. And some women may struggle with alcohol addiction. And what I can say personally in the last, say, 3 or 4 years that I also see is that drinking has become a very social norm, right? It's very normal and almost like expected that we would go out after the day's work or out for an evening and that you would consume alcohol. I've gone out recently and I don't drink um and I'm not drinking that evening or whatever, and I'll say, do you have a mocktail menu? Or can I see another option for an alcohol, like a non-alcoholic drink? And the first question, well, why aren't you drinking? Are you okay? And yes, Janelle, it is a wino culture. It is almost exceptionally. And it's like, I think I even seen on Facebook a wine night for moms, like Mummy and Wine Me night or something. So we are making, as society, we're glamorizing a drink. We're glamorizing that it's okay to have that alcohol. And what we've seen over the course of years is that the size of alcohol in a glass has changed. Years ago, for instance, you could go to um, order a glass of wine and you would get it in a normal one of those older style wine glasses, and 5 ounces would kind of, half be half in it. But over the course of the last few years, now we've upsized our glasses. So now we have like the big belly wine glasses, and we no longer can order the 5 ounce glass. Now it's a 6 or 9 ounce. And then they go, oh, for $1 more, I may as well drink the 9 ounce. So we've really changed our expectations around alcohol. And so if you are indulging and you are in this society and you're not planning to be pregnant, right? So it's those things that kind of help us move forward with understanding that unplanned pregnancies. And I can honestly say in almost 10 years of doing what I do and talking to families across the province is that no mother ever, ever intentionally wanted to harm their child. And women have big barriers for seeking help. There's a lot of shame and guilt that is around asking and seeking for help. Trauma may be stopping them. Fear of having their children removed is such a big one. Um, and I've worked with families that don't want even to have social development involved at any level, even for to offer the supports, right? It's that fear of being judged, the fear of having a child removed, and all of that that comes with it. feeling of depression and low self-esteem, belief that they can change on their own without assistance or support, lack of information, accessible services, and wait lists for treatments and services are long. So, why is alcohol so dangerous to the developing embryo and fetus? It's a toxin and a teratogen that can easily pass through the placenta, causing harm to the developing embryo and fetus at any time during the pregnancy, particularly affecting the central nervous system and causing physical damage. One of the questions that I always get is if I was to implement a strategy, Tanya, what would be my number one? And my answer is always the same, and that is to self-regulations, tools and strategies, but not only for the individual, for the child, but also for the parents or the caregiver. We need to calm our own central nervous system. We need to self-regulate ourselves. Then we can help our child. And the central nervous system is something that, in my experience, is often overlooked because we talk a lot about the brain, we talk a lot about behaviors, we talk about the challenges, but we forget what kind of, for me, is like the root of that, which is the central nervous system. So PAE is also associated, which is alcohol, is associated with a range of negative outcomes for fetal health, such as stillbirths, miscarriages, restricted growth in the womb, preterm birth, low birth weight, and FASD. What we know with common drugs and substances is that alcohol has the strongest effect on the birth effects. So for fetal growth abnormalities, the withdrawal, the neurobehavior, long-term growth, cognition, language, achievement. In this graph, what we see is that alcohol has a strong effect where nicotine may have an effect on for example, the fetal growth, but not so much with the abnormalities. And where marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamines, we can see that alcohol does the most damage to the developing fetus than a lot of the common drugs that we would hear more of. Risk factors associated with FASD. The most important risk factor is related to high blood alcohol concentration. So the timing of the exposure during fetus development, the pattern of drinking, and it's talking about the binge drinking per occasion. So if we think about an occasion, if it be a wedding, an anniversary, a graduation, any one of those things, like anything that you would celebrate, an occasion, it wouldn't be out of the norm to say that you would have more than 3 drinks. I remember when a friend got married a few years ago, they had pre-drinks, then they had drinks while they were like waiting in between the ceremony and the reception, and then of course there was drinks being done at the dance. In that one day, that one occasion, more than 3 drinks were consumed by people, and that is considered a binge drinking, right? And a drink is what is classified by the Canadian guidelines is basically like 1 can of beer, like 355 mils, like that 4% or whatever of alcohol. And usually when I do this presentation live, I'll actually have examples to show, and people laugh because it's considered a binge drink per occasion, and it's like, but I would have that on a Friday night, 4 or 5 drinks, and that would be a binge drinking. Other factors can affect fetal development, such as stress, the birthing parent's age, smoking or other drugs, and the birthing parent's nutrition. So nutrition also plays a value. There is no known safe amount of alcohol to consume that is risk-free, no type of alcohol that can be consumed during pregnancy that is risk-free, and there is no safe time during pregnancy. And The no safe time, there's a lot of myths around that. People will say, I've heard people say, well, I'm at the end of my pregnancy, so, and what research has showed us, it is still showing us that there's just no safe time to consume alcohol. FASD is not a result of an uncaring act. No one causes FASD on purpose, going back to almost 10 years of working with families and biological moms. I have yet to meet anybody that has purposely wanted to cause harm to their child. There is no blame, so please be gentle with birth moms. We know of no mother who would intentionally harm their baby. FASD can be a result of trauma, addiction, and or lack of information. Going back to the talking about the overlapping diagnosis, most of our kids who may come through clinic will have overlapping diagnosis. So they may already have 2 or 3 diagnoses before they come to clinic. The ones on your screen are the ones that we see the most of. And if you're working with, or if you're being a caregiver of an individual and say being on the wait list for clinic, or things aren't fitting and you're going through that whole journey of trying to figure out what is going on with your little person's brain, if they have 2 or 3 diagnoses and things still aren't kind of connecting the dots on, then that's where we should be looking at FASD. Any questions or comments so far?
I know with the timing, you talk about people at the end of pregnancy. I know when I was younger and in that new mom stage, it was always drink till it's pink, right? You could drink until that line changed.
Drink till it's
Yeah.
pink. Interesting. That's the first time I've heard that, Jessica. But you know what? You're right. And when it turns pink, you could already be 11 or 12 weeks along, right? If this here graph shows the development, we've probably all seen that little bean. You can download an app, I think, nowadays, and you can watch this little bean or this little baby kind of grow. And what you see through this is the central nervous system starts at 3 weeks-ish. And at that point, mom wouldn't even know that she's pregnant. And then it continues on. By 6 weeks, you have, the heart, the eye, the ear, the teeth, they're starting to form. By 9, 10 weeks, other things are forming. The brain is taking on. And the thing about the brain is that the brain continues to grow throughout pregnancy. It's the only organ that can grows all the way through pregnancy and grows to age 25. So with this slide, we can really see that there is just no safe time, no safe amount to consume during pregnancy, because it can interrupt any fetal growth being done during this time frame. And every time I look at this, I always see the teeth being formed like between 6 and 7 weeks. And my son, he has terrible growth with teeth. And we couldn't narrow it down for a long, long time of what exactly it was. Is it that they were just late coming in? Was it a speech impediment kind of thing? What was it? And when we investigated it, we went and worked with IWK with their dental team, is that he will only ever have 14 teeth. And he will lose 4 of those teeth and they won't grow back in. So forever, he will only have 10 teeth in his mouth. And we think, well, how's that possible? You're supposed to have like 30 some teeth, and whatever the number is. If somebody here knows the number, feel free to put it in the chat. But he's not going to have that full mouth full of teeth. And then it's like, well, why? That didn't develop. Like, why? And then if we look back to when he was during his baby growth, that there was actually a spot where teeth form, and we kind of overlook those things going back to that whole body disorder. Between day 17 and day 22 with this slide is what we see is where the face is being formed. And that's one of the things with FASD is it's known as a hidden disability or an invisible disability because there's no physical characteristics most of the time to show the disability. And it's because day 17 to day 22 is when the face is being formed. That's when alcohol has to cross the placenta. And that's a very small window, and most women don't even know that they're pregnant at that time. They're just about missing their first period and going, is the stick pink yet? You know, less than 10% of our children will have what we call the sentinel facial features. So when we talk about the sentinel facial features, it's the measurement of the each quarter of their eye, like and the distance from their eye to their nose. And there are two lines from their nose down to their lip and the thin upper lip. And to have a diagnosis of the facial features, the sentinel facial features, you would, when you come through clinic, they would measure all and you would have to have all three. Some people only have one or two things. They don't have all three. And that's why less than 10% of our population will have the facial features. And that is one of the things that makes um, having a child with FASD probably the most complex thing is because it's a brain-based disability and it's not a visual. And we can quickly forget that when we're dealing with an explosive behavior or a challenging symptom, and I'm going to come back to that word, so remember the word symptom, that we can kind of like get lost in the moment and kind of forget that that we're working with a child with disability. Um, some of our primary characteristics, so what you're going to see in an individual with FSD, a child, is their impulsivity. And that's going to look like different for each child, but it could be grabbing food from the counter before dinner, blurting something really quickly out in class, running towards something without realizing the dangers around that something, and with the excitement. So they're the kind of things that you're going to see with the impulse, that they do the action before they think about what they're doing, right? And we have to remember that it's a brain-based reason, which is the brain is struggling to pause before it acts, right? So the brain doesn't have the ability to pause before it's doing the task, before it's doing the impulsive thing. We're going to also see poor attention skills, needs repeated. And with that, we're going to see that they need things repeated, redirection to finish brushing teeth, maybe. Forget the second or third step of a direction. Many of our children are going to have a slower processing speed. So we tend to say, go get the milk out of the fridge and pour a glass of milk. That is a multiple step. There is a good chance that our kids might go to the fridge and then pour out juice. And we go, but that's not what I told you to do. I asked you to get the milk, right? But when they have a struggle with their poor attention skills, they're going to miss certain steps. We also tend to speak quicker than what their brain can process, which means that our individuals will only hear every second or third word that we say. So in that example of the milk in the fridge that I just gave, what they're actually picking up on is milk, fridge. They're at the fridge. Oh, it must be the juice that she wanted, right? So then we want to bring it back to the brain-based reason of attention system is easily overloaded. We'll also have some poor adaptive behavior, which is going to look like maybe a teenager who still needs to step-by-step coaching for daily routines. They might struggle with money or waiting in line. That's hard for them. We're going to bring it back to the brain-based reason, and we're going to bring it back to the adaptive skills that develop unevenly and more slowly. Dysmaturity, It's going to look like maybe a 16-year-old that is performing, preferring cartoons over something that they would like a normal, like what an adult would want to watch on TV. Or they're going to be that 16-year-old who wants to curl up on your lap and still be rocked or lullabied to sleep. My son's going to be 16 on the 19th, and he would still let me lullaby him to sleep every night, right? And with that, so if we bring it back to the brain-based reason, is social and emotional development is delayed compared to physical age. They will act much younger than their age. And in the next few slides, you're going to see a dysmaturity slide. And we're going to want to, if their chronological age is, say, 16, we're going to want to half that for our expectations. So my son is 16, and my expectations on him are of a 7-year-old. Sometimes, depending on the task, it could be um, like their expressive language, that could be off the charts, right? If we look at speech language delays, that could look like trouble telling a story in order, misunderstanding figurative language, speech sounds can be unclear. We want to bring that back to the brain-based reason. Language processing pathways are impacted. Socially, mentally undeveloped, so the stretched toddler kind of thing. It could look like needs close supervision, prefer parallel play, relies on visual cues and routines like a younger child. And one of the things that we don't have, that I'm not getting into a lot with tonight's presentation, is about the strategies of the 8 magic keys. And Jessica, I can send that out to you in a handbook if you like, in a email, and you could share it with your group if you wanted to. But part of those 8 magic keys is routine, structure, consistency, and how they thrive on those ways, and keeping language very simple, and remembering every second or third word is all that they hear. Memory problems, that's going to look like that they're forgetting rules from yesterday, but recalling random details from a year ago. And I would fall into that trap myself. I would think, oh my goodness, he has such a good memory because he can remember what I wore to a function a year ago or 3 years ago of an activity that we did or we went. And I would say, oh, but he's got such a great memory. But in the everyday, that short-term memory and the retrieval is inconsistent, right? And which then cause cognition challenges and memory challenges. Inconsistent performance. The only thing that is consistent about our individuals with FASD is their inconsistency. And everything that we take for granted, that we learn and that we just know, we have to teach our individuals those things, right? So we kind of grow up knowing certain things, such as maybe that a stove is hot. It's not, we always go, oh, hot. And we kind of, but it's the most simplest tasks that we don't, that we kind of take for granted that you just grew up knowing. Those are the things that you need to teach our individuals. It's the simple things, and the most current example I can think of is that my son just recently wanted to unlock our house door. So I gave him the keys and he went to the door to unlock it. And when he went to turn the lock, he hit that little bit of resistance. That's where you kind of push through to unlock the lock. And he's like, oh, no, I can't do it. And I was like, you can, you just keep turning it. You just, so then it became a whole teaching method. It was a whole teaching moment right there. So we had to empty our hands, take a deep breath because we're trying to get in the door. Your arms are full. You guys know what it's like. As if in that moment, the last thing you really wanted to do was teach something. It's just like, oh, for goodness sakes, just open the door and turn it already. But we can't do that. We have to be able to step back, take a deep breath, lower the stuff out of our hands. And in that moment, I was like, oh, So you're getting the resistance. And step by step, I had to teach him how to turn that lock all the way. Then take the key out and turn the knob and open the door and walk in. Step by step, broken down like that, right? One of those skills, like I don't ever remember step by step kind of unlocking a door. So the only thing, and some days they're going to get it, and then tomorrow they're not going to get it, right? It's like, well, we just went through this yesterday. Did you not know it then? Now is today. And it's like, holy smokes. And that is the only thing that is consistent about our kiddos is their inconsistency. And the other example is the light bulb analogy, right? And the best thing I can do is try to really narrow down to know when that light is on. When the light's on, everything's working. It's a good day. You get through your tasks. Everybody's happy. The next day, maybe the light is blinking. Like when the light starts to go out, it kind of blinks. Well, maybe you start out the day really, really well, and the light's fully on, and then it kind of starts blinking that light, and then they lose their executive function fuel, right? And then it kind of, if we think about the light bulb analogy. The other common primary characteristics that we're going to see is attention deficits, restless moves from place to place. That's going to look like learns to cross safely at, say, one intersection, but doesn't apply it at the rules at another intersection. And that can be within the same intersection. So if you're crossing, say, a street like an L and you're crossing this way, and then you have to go across, you can go all the steps, step by step, and successfully across this first crosswalk, and then the second one have to teach it again in the exact same way at that second spot, even though it's in the same environment and at the same time, but it's in a different way. And that's really, really hard, is to be able to teach things in the same way. Any comments or questions, Jessica?
Yeah, there's one here that says it would be a challenge for helping them develop and want to do 16-year-old things like driving, but not actually be ready for that responsibility.
Oof, that's a tough
Yes.
one. That's a hard one for our kids because um it's an expectation too, right? So society puts that
Ivy.
expectation, right? That, oh, they're 16 and so so got their license or their permits, and that's kind of this goes with that sweet 16. Um the beauty though, I will say, when we embrace and we find purpose, value, and worth for our kiddos, we embrace the disability, we learn about their brain, we make that what is called the paradigm shift. So that's when we actually switch our brains from that they can't or that they won't do something to understanding that they really can't do things. And we change our approaches with these things. And we learn this skill on how to say, I understand you're 16, you want your license, but we can't for whatever reason. When we have the skill set to be able to do that in the understanding of their disability, it can go smoothly. And here's an example. My son will be 16, so we're hitting this right now. And I always said, if anybody says that he can get his license at 16, I'm going to kick them in the shins because that's not that he doesn't have that ability right now. Right now. That doesn't mean that he's not going to have it when he's 30. But for right now, he's not going to have that. So how I framed that to my son was I didn't say, oh no, you can't have your driver's license. No, you can't do this. You can't do that. And go through all of the no's and the can'ts to how cool is it that you get to be chauffeured? You get to be driven around. You get to be a passenger prince, right? And it's about having the skill set and the ability to take something and switch it around. Now, is this going to work when he's 18? I don't know. We'll come back in 2 years and I'll maybe have a new strategy. But for right now, that's how we're handling it. And he thinks that's pretty cool. He goes to school and he says, "Well, I'm going to be a passenger prince. I don't have to drive." Then he come home there a couple weeks ago and he said, "But I want to be able to own a car. So will I never, if I'm going to be driven around, I won't own a car." Sure, you can own a car, but first you need a job. You need to be able to pay for the car. You're going to have to do the maintenance on a car. Can you do that right now? No. Okay, so then we have to work towards those steps, right? And what if, you don't drive a car? Will he be able to own a car? Sure, he just has to figure out the insurance part so that his support person could be able to drive the car, is what I said. So what I'm doing through those steps is for the lack of a better word, I'm normalizing our life and embracing his disability. Um, and then he's able to be successful. It's just about finding ways of how that works. The driver's license thing at 16 is always a hiccup. It's always hard. Any other comments or questions?
Oh yeah, Patricia says that she's lost count of how many times she has to remind her kiddos to free their hands before doing something, that they try to balance everything with full hands and then get frustrated.
Isn't it hard? Oh, it is so hard. Um, and the other thing that I've had to do in the recent years as a tool, because I always get questions on, well, what do you do for a strategy? What do you do for a tool? And one of the things that I've done, call it selfish, call it whatever. Me, I call it survival, is that I've taught my son that before we can start our day, I need a cup of coffee. And it's okay to teach our kiddos what we need, right? We can teach them that, you know what? Before I start my day, before I can be, excuse me, that amazing mom, I just need 5 minutes when I wake up to pour a cup of coffee, put my hair up in a ponytail because you can never be regulated with your hair down. If you have long hair, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The only way you can get anything done or regulate is with your hair in a ponytail. And I tell Ben, I need 10 minutes, 5 minutes to do that. Now, what we've done is step two, because he would pace and he'd be like, "Are you done yet? Did you have your coffee yet?" Now, what we've done is entered step two, where he can make me a cup of coffee because our kids generally are pleasers. Those with an FASD diagnosis are generally pleasers. So to start out our day, I'm like, "Oh, I would really love if you could, make me a cup of coffee." Now, is he going to grind the coffee beans and all of that? No. What does he do? He's K-pots, right? And we do it enough that he's learned that. And now he's like, "Can I give you a cup of coffee?" And he's a pleaser. So it starts our day off in a nice rhythm. Um, so it's about learning tools as we go. And sometimes the most frustrating things like having to empty our hands, we need to have that sanity break. And that's where I've learned the coffee trick. Some more common primary challenges that you're going to see in the early days of an individual with FASD would be difficulty generalizing, forming links, and making associations. They're not going to be able to get that cause and effect. If I do this, that outcome is going to happen. They're going to have struggles with abstract and predicting outcomes, over and under sensitive stimuli, slower brain processing rate, which we had talked about earlier. Majority of our kids are going to have a processing speed of about 45 seconds to about a minute. And I'm just going to do an exercise with you to show just how long, because we can say, "Oh, well, that's not that long." But this is an example that I use a lot, and it's usually a really good eye opener. I just have to find a stopwatch. There we go. So if we're thinking about a scenario, and let me think of one. Let's say you're trying to get out the door for school. And we're in this change of seasons, so we're going to be going to our winter gear here soon, which I don't know if you guys are like me, but that's another whole ball game. We could do probably another workshop all alone on change of seasons and um, changing clothing and all of the like getting into our winter gear and out of our winter gear. So with the processing speed, and this is kind of like a strategy and a tip, okay? Is so I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to go through a scenario. And right now, we're out the door. All right, it's time to get your boots, coats, and hat on. Let's go. The kid's waiting. He's fiddling. He's not paying attention. He's acting like he didn't even hear you. Okay, it's time to go. Let's go. Get your coat, boot, and hats on. Did you get your boots on? Ben, I told you it's time to put your boots on. If you don't soon get ready, we're going to be late for school. And then he starts to put his boots on. It is only 32 seconds in that time span. I didn't even torture you through the whole 45 seconds to a minute. I said the command 3 different ways. My tone has changed, which they can pick up on. And my body language has probably changed. If I was doing this in person and we're standing in a room, my body language would have changed. In that moment, because he only started putting his boots on and say at the 30-second mark, I have already thought he's not listening to me. You're going to be late for school. We gotta go. But when we bring it back to the brain, his brain didn't even process the first word that I said. And I've already changed my body language, already changed my tone. I've already said the same command 3 different ways, and I don't know why you're not getting out the door. Well, if we bring it back to the brain, I just gave you all the reasons why it didn't work. So what happens is when we're able to step back, bring it back to the brain, how we would do that exact same thing, remembering the processing speed of their brain is, we have to go to school. Maybe we should put boots on. Wait. Wait. How painful is that? How painful is it just me trying to do a presentation and making you wait? Right? And they haven't even, and if this was a task that we're working with our kids, they wouldn't even have heard your first word. Once they put the boots on, great job, high five. You want to give that quick praise, that quick reward to release that dopamine hit for them, right? It puts them in that feel good moment, that feel good. Yeah, I did real well. Thanks for the high five. Now, next, coat on. Wait, wait, wait. I'm not changing my expressions. I'm not changing body language. I'm regulating myself. Ah, good job on the coat. Hat, please. My words are slow, few, and I'm waiting. And it is the most painful thing that we can do. And we're not built that way. We're trying to get out the door. Who has time to wait you out? But I just wanted to take the time to show you that one example of using a strategy to get out the door and recognizing the brain processing speed. Majority of our individuals will have sleep disturbances. I don't know many of the kids that actually sleep through a whole night. They may be in bed all night, but are they actually sleeping? Are they waking up rested? Are they waking up and their blankets are all over the place? Is their hair a mess? Are they showing clear visual cues that they had a restless sleep, right? Sleep disturbances, no concept of ownership. Our kids are accused of stealing all the time. So whenever I have a parent say, well, they're stealing or this or that, I'm like, did they steal it or did they just see that it's there? Right? I'm really thirsty right now. This bottle of water doesn't have anybody's name on it. It's sitting there. I'm going to take it and I'm going to drink it. Walk away with it. Did I steal it? If I was doing this I really struggle doing presentations virtually. I'm going to be honest with you folks. I haven't done enough of them to have enough practice. But if I did this presentation in person, I would literally walk around the room and I would take somebody's water bottle and they would be kind of like looking at me. And I'm like, what? Oh, this didn't have your name on it. I didn't know it was yours. It was just sitting there. It happens with bikes, right? We say when our kid goes, down the street to play with little Johnny, and we say, don't be late coming home, right? Well, it's now late and he knows and he's got to get home because he's going to get in trouble if he doesn't. And there's a bicycle just sitting there. There's no name on it. Nobody's near it. Nobody's driving it. They hop on the bike and they run home and they make it in on time. Yay, good job. Then they get accused of stealing the bike, but the bike was just there. I had to come home, right? So no sense of ownership, and no concept of personal space, right? Through COVID, we kind of arm length and 6 feet apart and whatever, those things. And we put tape on, sometimes you'll see schools or homes that you can't go past this tape. Like that, this is a threshold, like this is teaching them boundaries, right? Um, yeah. Is there any comments or questions?
Yeah, so a couple. The first one is when we learned about um, that processing speed piece, our psychologist explained it as going on dial-up. And as a society, we're so used to like everything coming so fast to us now instantly, to have to go back and think about what it was like to use a computer in, the early even 2000s, right? And it was on dial-up and it was slow and you had to wait and wait and wait just for that website to load. It's the same thing with their brains, right? Processing, they're loading,
Yep.
that. Yeah. Janelle has a question about setting clear boundaries for behavior. Do you have a section later? Would you like to go on it right now?
I'm sorry, what was it?
It's on clear boundaries for behaviors.
Let's come back to that one. I don't have
Yeah,
anything on that one, but I think that's something that we could do in our Q&A,
perfect.
if that's
Okay,
okay with
Janelle,
you
we'll come back.
folks. Talking about the processing, Jessica, you reminded me. So one of the phrases that we often will say is that we have 10-second kids living in a 1-second world,
Mm.
right? So our kids take longer to do something than what the world wants to give them. And case in point, the best example is going, say, if we're going through Tim Hortons drive-through or any drive-through, I shouldn't just say Tim Hortons, but any drive-through. And you go to use your debit card, and that tap it and it doesn't work. Well, I have to put in my code. I have to choose the account that it comes from or whatever. It only takes an extra 5 seconds out of our day, but it's enough to ruin our day when that tap doesn't work, when we're in a hurry, right? And oftentimes our kids are like a 10-second kids in a 1-second world. I could talk all about drive-throughs. They're so interesting because, we teach our kids not to talk to strangers, right? And to stay focused when you're at a store and etc. And when I was talking about stranger danger with my son, and we went through a drive-through, and he said, "You're talking to them, mom. You're not allowed to. You don't know them. They're a stranger." Our kids are so like concrete. They're so like in the know, right? And I thought, whew, you're right. She is a stranger, but we have to talk to her to give her our order. So there's rules to the exception. Like there's always exceptions, right? And that's what makes it really hard teaching our kids new tasks. Okay, so no, you can't talk to strangers, but yes, you're expected to talk to a stranger when you order a cup of coffee. And then you have to explain out why the difference is and how the difference is. And that's really exhausting, but that is the level of teaching that our kids need for their brains. This is the slide on dysmaturity that I was talking about earlier. So the chronological age could be, say, 20 years old. No, 18 on this slide is they're actually 18 years old. Expressive language, they're always going to be higher in age than what their chronological age. Money concept is of an 8-year-old. Social skills could be of a 7-year-old. So as a rule of thumb, we would typically half their chronological age and put their developmental age, of half of that. But then when it comes to certain skills like social skills and those things, or comprehension and social maturity, they may be much younger or older depending on the task. Adverse outcomes used to be known as secondary outcomes. When FASD is not well understood and individuals do not get the support they need, some of their adverse outcomes is going to be mental health challenges, 90%. We're going to see disruptive school experiences, 43% is 12 and younger, 14% is 12 and older, inappropriate sexual behaviors, substance abuse, trouble with the law. And so what we always try to do is to avoid these secondary outcomes or adverse outcomes. And they can be avoided, and we can not, we have the ability of not getting to those by putting protective factors in place. And protective factors that may help reduce emergence and effects of adverse outcomes include the number one is living in a stable and nurturing home. Right? I can't stress enough how important it is to have a stable environment for our kids. The brain power that it takes for them to bounce between different environments and different placements is a lot. So the number one protective factor that we could put into place is living in a stable, nurturing home, not having frequent changes of households, not being a victim of violence. Our population is the most vulnerable population, and oftentimes are a victim of violence. Having received developmental disability services, having been diagnosed before the age of 6, having a diagnosis of FASD, and they are FAS rather than FAE. That's going back to older language. Having wraparound services for everyone. One of my personal soapboxes that I am on all the time, if you know me at all personally, is that we need wraparound services for everybody in the whole household. When we support the family and we wrap around the family and we wrap services around the family, like moms, dads, siblings, aunts, uncles, whoever is involved with that child, then we support the child. By supporting the family, then we're supporting the child. And if you think about like a whole web, a spider web, and in the center is the individual living with FASD, and then everybody kind of around them. So this is a little soapbox that I get on all the time. I could probably take another full evening talking about the importance of wraparound services for everybody. But when we do that, we support the child. Some signs and symptoms across the lifespan. I'm not going to get into a lot of these, but school age, what you might see is that they're falling behind in reading and writing, attention deficit, impulsive control, inability to transfer maybe from learning from one situation to another, need constant supervision. In the adolescence, we're going to see beginning of absenteeism, school refusal, increase of disruptive behavior at school, difficulty with basic problem solving. They'll be able to repeat the rules and instructions, but not able to practice. That, as a parent for me, is something that I stumbled on all the time because I couldn't understand, if you asked him, do you understand this? Yes, and he can repeat exactly what you said, but when it comes to applying it, it's a totally different story. And in the heat of the moment and in the everyday life, we can get caught up in the moment of, well, you just told me how to do it. You just explained to me. How did you not do the lot, like throw your laundry in the hamper, let's say? You just talked it out with me. Right? but they have a hard time being able to put it into practice. Not very motivated. We might see some low self-esteem, risk of depressions, impulsive, easily influenced by our peers, may have difficulty with the law, difficulties identifying feelings. When they get into the adult world, difficulty getting into and maintaining a job, because that comes with different layers. So we have job coaches. We could bring them in. Then they need to know about the brain-based disability. They need to know what works best for little Johnny. Unable to live independently, majority of our kids will always need some sort of support. But when we share that with our individuals, when I always sit down with an individual to share that with them, I always talk to about them and I say, but we all need supports, right? I can't go without my phone without having communication with people. I depend on my phone as a support for my calendar, for reminders, right? We all have some sort of supports. Um, they may be unable to live independently, difficulty managing finances, social difficulties, unpredictability, social isolation becomes very real for our adults. They may end up starting to abuse alcohol and other substances, um, and enter depressive or suicidal. But when we identify their strengths and their interests, then we have the ability to change those outcomes, right? And when we want to identify their strength, when we're trying to identify their interests, some of the questions that we can ask ourselves when we're trying to do this, because we can get lost in it and go, what is he really good at? I don't know, right? I just know that every day I want to scream or pull my hair out. That's the reality, right? But when we can ask questions like, what lights this person up? What excites them? What makes their eyes big like saucers? What makes them happy? We all have stuff that lights us up, right? What comes naturally to them? So, what comes to them that no work is needed, that they just automatically can do on their own? What do they like to talk about? It could be something as crazy and silly as Pokemon. But if that's something they like to talk about, then that's a strength and an interest that you can apply into their everydays. Like, how can you apply Pokemon? Well, believe it or not, I have strategies for that. So if you have a youth that likes Pokemon and you need to use that as a tool, look me up. I have a whole list of things, and it could be practicing. We started with my son learning how to print Pokemon words out because it was an interest. So he would do printing for 5 minutes because he was printing his favorite Pokemon. He got to learn about a Pokemon power, so that increased his ability to read. Now he's 16. His reading ability is of a kindergarten. So where is my expectations going to be set at? At a kindergarten level, even though he stands as tall as me and is almost an adult male, right? And what do others celebrate in them? So sometimes as parents, we're in the thick of it and it's really hard and it's really hard to see that silver lining. But those around us in our village, we can ask them, like, what do you see in him? What do you see in her? Right? And they're not in the thick of the forest. So they're able to see outside the forest and say, oh, he's really liking this, or he really loves that, or this is a real interest to him. Oh, shoot, I never even noticed that. Great, thank you. So then you add that to the strengths and interests. And when you do that, then this is when you build your list, something like that's on the screen. Some of our individuals learn best one-on-one. If you put them in a crowd, they get shy and they can't handle that. They're concrete thinkers. It's in the now and the right here. But you just said, right? Strong visual memory, learns well by doing and exploring. They're energetic. They are generally athletic of some sort. They're super affectionate. And as much as, people will say, yeah, right, Tanya, I can promise you that our kids are the most affectionate, compassionate individuals on the earth. They are eager to please. What hurts them from continuing to do that is by always having to shrink themselves to fit into society and not be who they are. Majority of our individuals are friendly, curious, good with younger children and animals, determined, amazing strength in the face of adversities, and there is nobody more resilient on the planet than our individuals. And I have to say, as our parents raising these kids, we are resilient. We are in it to win it kind of thing. FASD is real. Meet Ben. He's a local champion. He's also my son, and I'm proud to be his mom, and I feel that I'm the luckiest mom on earth to have him. Individuals living with FASD have unique strengths and needs. Understanding their strengths and needs is essential to delivering a respectful, person-centered approach. Doing so will allow them to be productive, meaningful, and purposeful, and allow them to live a life with joy, love, and acceptance. And at the end of the day, isn't that all what we all want? We all want the same love, joy, acceptance. Our individuals with fetal alcohol want the same things. We just have to find ways to give it to them. For the sake of time, I know I'm a little bit over.
You're okay. Yep.
Am I good? Okay.
Yep.
If we talk about the 10 brain domains really quickly, so when you come through clinic, we talk a lot about the brain, and the brain is made up of 10 parts. And those 10 parts, part one would be your academic achievement, your attention, cognition, language, memory, which may experience short and long-term memory deficits and can struggle with the cause and effect of actions, motor skills, their neuroanatomy, executive function, affect regulation, adaptive behavior. If I was to add an 11th brain domain, which I totally believe that should be part of the DM, is sensory processing. When an individual comes through clinic to have a diagnosis of FASD, they would have impairments in 3 of these 10 brain domains, with or without the sentinel facial features, which we talked about earlier. My number one tool for you, for your toolbox that I would love to leave with you tonight, if you take away from anything else of tonight, is when you label symptoms as behaviors, the child is seen as being the problem, right? And we can get stuck in that problem way. But when we change behavior is a symptom of the individual's disability. So we want to see the behavior as a symptom. Very few times will you ever hear me say that Ben has a behavior, because what that does is when I say he's got a behavior, it goes, oh, now what? And we think that we have to add a punishment or something in place of that behavior. It's negative, it's bad, right? But when I say Ben had symptoms today, it's like, oh, shoot, how can I help? What can I do? And the behaviors that our individuals have is a symptom of their disability. If you have symptoms of a cold and flu, people go, oh, do you want some chicken soup? Do you want some Advil? Is there anything I can get for you? You have more of a want to help, right? So it's about making that shift that I was talking about earlier in the brain, that paradigm shift of seeing that their behaviors is a symptom of a medical disability, right? And when we see it and we can change it in our brain and the paradigm shift that way, then our approach will be better. And that is one of probably the first steps of self-regulating, is to change this word. Like this one simple thing is that I first did, and that helped me change my approach, because now I see that this behavior is actually a symptom, right? When he's being impulsive and vocal purging and he's like, I da 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 da, and he slams the door, I'm like, okay, so this is a symptom of his disability. This is not a behavioral act, even though it looks like it. That is probably the most struggling in the most complex thing of FASD.
I love that reframe. Love it.
Thank you. At the Center of Excellence, these are the list of things that we do, and this is a French slide. Tell my brain was tired today when I put this in, and I don't speak French. But we do diagnostic clinics, 0 to 18 years of age. We do prevention piece, education, which brings me why I'm with you folks this evening. Our team consists of 2 pediatricians. I think we're at 3 no, that's right. 2 pediatricians and 1 general practitioner, 1 psychologist, 1 neuropsychologist, a program manager, an occupational therapist, speech language pathologist, 2 Aboriginal liaison, 4 regional community coordinators, 2 educational coordinators, 1 being myself, and Maria had done the French version of this exact presentation. She would be the other. 2 clinical coordinators, 3 administrative assistants, 1 quality assurance training and professional development coordinator, elders, learning specialist, FASD liaison. We are partnering with the First Nations for better healing and co-creation of the Dreamcatcher service delivery model. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This is how you can reach us. I'm not sure if our website is up and running yet. It was underneath repair. So if you go there and it's not, I apologize, but you can feel free to call us. That's it.
Great. So we are going to turn off our live stream and go into our Q&A. Thanks for watching if you watched us on Facebook today.